Hi, everybody. My name is Nanika Edwards, and among other things, I'm an artist, author, and poet. One of the things that I love doing is what I call Bible noodling and doodling. By noodling, I mean using my brain, using my intellect as I explore the Bible, like connecting with the Bible from an intellectual perspective, from a heart and life application perspective, but I also doodle, which means I do these simple minimalistic drawings when I go through my word study. I also pen poetry as well, but the main thing when I started at least was to both noodle and doodle. That was my main thing. In this video, what I would like to do is share some art making tips, especially for people who would like to Bible journal, Bible scrapbook, as some people call it, but you may feel a bit at sea when it comes to the art making part of things, if that's the road you'd like to go down. Some people just transcribe the text and, copy the text that's it. And if that's what you'd like to do, that's cool. But if you like to just add a bit more color to what you do, metaphorically speaking, if you just like to make this experience a bit more of an adventure in a sense, a bit more of a panoramic adventure, then I would encourage you to add art making to the mix. And you don't have to be a big time artist to do that, right? So I'm going to share some tips about what you can do and how you can explore the Bible from an artistic perspective or through an artistic lens. First of all, you can learn how to draw, paint, and so on at a kiddie level. And I know that may sound kind of counterintuitive for adults, but that's one of the best ways to learn. Like, just learn how to draw simple drawings. And really, the minimalist art that I infuse into my study is very childlike, and it works perfectly. It really works perfectly. You don't have to do like absolute fine art masterpieces to illustrate your Bible noodling or to illustrate your Bible scribing. It's not absolutely necessary. So you can go on YouTube or other social media spots and find art making tutorials for kids. That would be my first piece of advice, Personally, I think that making childlike art is one of the most fun forms of art making. So you really can't go wrong there. The second thing that I would recommend is doing a bit of online sleuthing or book reading on the elements of art. If you have a general sense of the elements of art, which include things like line, shape, color, and how these things work in art, then it's going to really help you with your art making. And it's not a long list. It's just about maybe 6 or 7 things on the list of elements of art. And once you have a sense that those are some of the key things that you should keep in mind when you're doing your doodling, I think it would be very helpful. I'll put up a list of the elements on the screen so that you can at least have a general overview idea of what they are. And I'll also share a link to my videos on the elements of art on my Nanika Edwards channel, which is for kids. Once you've covered the elements of art, you can then move on to the principles of design. It's similar to the elements of art, but it's a little more sophisticated, a little more artistically mature in perspective and what you have to consider. Principles of design are kind of a step up from the elements of art. And again, I'll put a list on the screen so that you can see what is generally involved here. But I would encourage you, again, go online or get to a library or purchase some books that can help you navigate the principles of design. They're not difficult to understand. They're very easy to wrap your mind around, and I think you would find them helpful. By the way, the artwork that you see on the screen here is a bottle of sorrel and a cup of sorrel. Here in Trinidad, we don't typically drink sorrel out of a cup like that, but typically it would be in a glass or, a plastic cup or something. And sorrel, by the way, is a seasonal drink. At least when I was growing up, it was a seasonal drink that we tended to drink around Christmas time. Now I think people drink it year round, but that's what you're seeing on the screen. As you can see, it's a very simple illustration and not difficult to reproduce. Very easy to put this down on paper. And let's talk about art mediums. Like, what kind of art mediums can you explore? Like, there are different art mediums that you can think of working into your Bible scrapbooking. You can maybe select one, or you can select multiple ones. You can switch things up to keep things interesting. You can do whatever you want, but there are lots of options when it comes to deciding on what type of art you'd like to apply to your Bible journaling. Here is a list of options that you can consider. Drawing, painting, collaging, like the girl that you see here. This is my Caribbean girl from my book, I Am Beautiful, which is a multicultural tour of the world that is designed to build self-esteem in girls, in girls and women in particular. So let me start over. You can consider drawing, painting, collaging, textile art. Textile art would include things like embroidery, crocheting, knitting. You can consider sculpting, calligraphy, blogging, animation. I mean, there's so many things that you can explore, and I'm pretty sure this list is not even exhaustive. So there are lots of things you can consider when you think about Bible scrapbooking. Who knows, you might even develop a completely new talent that you never even knew was resident within your inner world. By the way, keep in mind that the medium would decide the paper. For example, personally, I typically do my artwork on, generally speaking, like for example, when I'm illustrating my books, when I'm doing my Bible journaling, I journal in notebooks. So it's just regular paper. And I also, if I'm not Bible journaling, but I'm illustrating my books, I would simply use regular photocopy paper. But like with this artwork that you see here with the peacock, I used black Bristol board and used acrylic paint on the Bristol board. So that's what you're seeing here. With the girl before, on the slide before, the Caribbean girl, that's a collage and it's a paper collage. So I did that with paper. Cut out paper and stick it on paper, as simple as that. This particular painting, right? So this is a painting. This is a watercolor painting. Very simple. It's just a linear image, right? This particular painting I did on watercolor paper, and it has like a texture to it. It's a little rough, and it's thick enough to absorb all of the liquid in the watercolors, because of course watercolors tend to be pretty watery. So if you go for watercolors, you need to have paper that's thick enough to absorb it. So one of the things you can consider, for example, is scrapbooking directly into some type of sketchbook. That's something that you can consider. And by the way, with a sketchbook or a watercolor pad, you don't only have to watercolor. You could even collage. You can use some of the paper, some of the space in the book to collage or to draw, do different things. But you could definitely, if you want, use a whole watercolor pad to do Bible journaling through watercolor painting. And if the paper is a little rough and too rough to actually use a regular pen on, what you could do is write your transcribed text or whatever text you want to put down on paper onto some separate type of paper like cardboard or copy paper, and then cut that out and stick it onto the watercolor paper. So that's something that you can do as well. By the way, here what you see is, can you guess? Yes, it's a cactus and sunshine in the background, so, and sand that it's kind of popping out of. So that's what you're looking at here. The Bible has a lot of human interest stories, right? The Bible is like a biographical panorama of so many human stories. So one of the things that I think would be really useful to learn, one of the things that would be really useful to have in your artistic toolbox would be being able to do facial expressions, like simple facial expressions. And you can pause the video and check out the chart that I have here so that you can see how to do different expressions. I mean, happy face, sad face. I mean, emojis can help you with this as well, right? If you wanna cheat, if you need a cheat sheet, you can just check the emojis on your phone. But you know, it's very simple to do facial expressions. Very, very simple. You know, a simple round face. Or if you want to represent that it's a guy, you can do a more angular, squared, rectangular face, because men tend to have a more chiseled look, a more chiseled face. So if you want to show that it's a guy, you can do a square or a rectangle. If it's a lady, you can do a more rounded face. And yeah, so facial expressions, that's easy. Or as we say in Trinidad, that'd be sockeye, right? That'd be sockeye. You can also consider stick people. Now, stick people are really easy to do. They're just sticks. And some people say, I can't even do a stick person. No, that's not true. You can most definitely do a stick person. You just need a circle or a square or rectangle for the head, a stick coming down for the body, two slanted lines coming from that stick that is the torso, and maybe some ovals for the feet, ovals for the hands, and you're good, right? So stick people are not difficult. Please don't sabotage your progress or your success by saying that you cannot do things that you most definitely can. Stick people are very easy to do. And even if you think, I can't do stick people, and if you like buy into your own hype, then I would suggest that you, check out some videos online, because there are people who cover stick people and they show you how to do stick people, right? You have no excuse, people. You can most definitely do stick people. And even if that's where you start, that's probably not where you're going to end. So I would encourage you, start with stick people and then see where it leads you. There are lots of videos also that teach how to draw the human figure properly and so on. You can do it cartoon style. You can do it realistic style. But you know, it's totally up to you. But you can definitely start with stick people and still produce really cool art. And even if it doesn't start off looking the way that you might like, at least when you flip through your books at some point when you're much better and much further along, you'll definitely give yourself a good laugh. So the stick people are definitely worth it. So here's another one of my stick people. This is a painting. So these stick people that you see here, they were painted with, I think, with acrylic paint. I think this is acrylic paint here. This particular stick person was done with watercolors. So this is a watercolor stick person. And of course, you know, in the Bible, there are a lot of animals. There are a lot of different animals. So you may want to also just, you may want to just narrow the focus of your online researching and the online tutorials that you look at to learn how to do art. And you should definitely look at some videos on how to draw some simple animals. Like I said, kitty style is the best way to start off. Here you can see a fish. This is from my Critter Calligraphy collection. I have a coloring book based on this collection that's on Amazon. And I also have a book with super short stories based on this collection that's also on Amazon. I'll put the links below the video for all the books that I mentioned in this video. By the way, this fish was done with markers, and that's another thing. You can use regular markers to do drawings as well. It doesn't have to be super fancy paint. You can use simple budget-friendly markers and voila, you have some beautiful art. Something that you can also consider is calligraphy, and it doesn't have to be super expensive. For this parrot, I used chisel tip markers, right? I don't use the fancy calligraphy materials like the inks and the brushes and the paper and so on. This was done on regular photocopy paper. I scanned it, and you know, and then I just scanned it. For this, I use a chisel tip marker, and you get a lovely calligraphy effect. So you can consider, so one of the things you can consider is calligraphy. And as you can see, I used my calligraphy marker, because it is a marker. I used my calligraphy marker to do the actual image of the parrot and also the lettering. So you can use a chisel tip marker not only for the text aspect to produce a particular type of font style, but also you can use it for the image aspect of your artwork. Right? So as you can see here for the word peace, right? This was for a special set of videos that I had done on Chinese etymology. But here, as you can see, I used a chisel tip marker to produce the word peace. I played around with the coloring. Color is one of the elements of art. So if you can play around with coloring and different things like that, you know, the elements of art, the principles of design, as you can see, the letters are not all on one line. There is diversity in the leveling. So, you know, that's one of the principles of design that I applied there. Yeah, you can do so many things with chisel tip markers and with color and just playing around with different things. The more you play around with stuff, the more you're going to develop your own style and come into your own. But anyway, here you can see an example of how I use chisel tip markers to just produce lettering with no image. You can even consider sculpting. Now, of course, you cannot place a sculpture in a notebook or in a journal or something like that. But if you would like, what you can do, one of the things you can consider doing is producing a sculpture to complement your own coffee table book. Like if you're somebody who likes to be hospitable and somebody who likes to invite people to spend time with you in your home and things like that, one of the ways that you can provide lovely, edifying entertainment for both Christians and non-Christians is by having Bible journals as coffee table books, your own Bible journals, you know. And if you want to complement your journal with a sculpture, a little mini sculpture that you leave on your coffee table, I think that's a beautiful thing and a very creative thing to do. And it can just make Bible exploration that much more fun. And here you can see a sculpture that I did many moons ago. It was one of my first attempts, maybe my only attempt actually, at producing a sculpture of any kind. And I'd like to just send a shout out to Vera. Vera, you know who you are. I did this during your art class back in the day, many, many years ago. And yeah, so you can consider sculpture as part of your Bible scrapbooking journey, as part of your Bible journaling journey. And finally, my final advice would be, please don't sabotage your potential by saying, I can't do this and I can't do that. Try changing your language. Say, you know, it would be challenging for me, but at least I think I could try. I'd like to try and see. I'd like to give it a go. Remember, people, things don't just fall out of the sky and land in people's laps. I had to really work at my art before I got to where I am today. I'm going to show you the difference between where I started off and where I am today in a couple different slides, and you're going to see that I have really evolved and come into my own, and so can you. So please don't discourage yourself by downplaying your potential by being negative. No, tell yourself, you know what? It may not be in my wheelhouse right now, but I can at least try. So that's it. Bible noodling and doodling, how to be artistic.